Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for joining today for our workshop on investment strategies in China. I think all the attendees are now being able to connected. I'm Veronica Gianola and I'm the Senior Associate of D'Andrea & Partner Legal Counsel in Milan office. I will have the pleasure to moderate the webinar of today. First of all, I would like to thank all our esteemed speakers for joining us today, and we look forward to share with them their precious point of views regarding the best strategies for the investors in China. Before moving on with the discussion, I would like to introduce you DP Group to understand better who we are and the services that we provide. Let me share the screen. Okay, so DP Group is present in different countries in the world, in China, in Italy, in Vietnam, Dubai, India, and we have a Russian desk. Our mission is to be present in every business capital of the world to make the global business environment better through our work. DP Group is composed of 4 companies: D'Andrea & Partner Legal Counsel, which is the law firm, and today we will have Mr. Shane Farley and Riccardo Verzella on behalf of DNP Legal Counsel. PHC Advisory, Tax and Accounting, we will have today Mr. Devin Lee. Eastern Communication and Events, and today we will have the pleasure to listen our Gaia Rizzi and Chance and Better. To deep a little bit into the specialties of all the companies, D'Andrea & Partner Legal Counsel practice areas are corporate and commercial law, legal compliance, M&A, environmental law, dispute resolution, labor law, IPR, and of course investments. For PHC Tax and Accounting, the company supports small and medium enterprises as well as multinational companies in China, Vietnam, India, and Italy for activities of accounting, financial supervision, internal audit, M&A, and business consulting. Eastern Communication and Events is an international agency specialized in social media management, digital marketing, PR, and events planning. Chance and Better Education is the newly born of our group and is in charge, let's say, of organizing short-term visit and senior courses at universities, internship, language training, and online courses. We take care also about spreading the knowledge through the draft and the publication of different guides for Italy, for Vietnam. We have Invest in Italy, Foreign Direct Investments in Vietnam, in the Industrial Zone, Certificate of Origin, and Invest in Belarus, together with the China practical guides on intellectual property rights, foreign direct investments, free trade zone, labor law, contracts, and Invest in Southwest. Most of these guides have been published in Italy with Milano Finanza and Italia Oggi, together with Classe Editori. So here you can see our offices, Shanghai, Beijing, Nanjing, and Chongqing in China, Pune in India, Milan and Pescara in Italy, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and Dubai. I will now would pass to the core of our presentation today. Please remember that the chat is open if you have any question. I would like now to give the word and introduce, while thanking him to participate today, Mr. Gianpaolo Bruno, who is the ITA-ICE Trade Commissioner of Beijing Office and the coordinator of ITA-ICE offices in China and Mongolia. Mr. Bruno, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good day, everyone. I'm very thrilled and honored to introduce this workshop today. And I would like to thank very much indeed Andrea and Partner Legal Counsel, as well as Eastern Communication for organizing this interesting digital gathering. We all know that strategy determines the direction in which a business will head. And this seminar would like to shed a light to answer the question, what should we do while approaching China as a potential strategic location for our corporate investment? As a matter of fact, in navigating the opportunities for growth, a company can get lost in the kaleidoscope of rules, regulations, but also opportunities and threats. Contemplating entry into such a complex market like China, any intelligent investor should have really a clear understanding of best practices to follow, key regulatory issues to consider, accounting principles to adhere to, tax compliance issues, and of course, marketing trends and opportunities. And one should know that China markets and economies are heavily subject to state influence, and sudden changes in policy direction can change the business environment. Despite the free market principles China has adopted in recent years, the rules that govern a company in China are very different from those in the West. Furthermore, not only do Chinese accounting standards differ from the international generally accepted accounting principles, but regulatory differences abound. And China's government is making a long-term effort to reform and open up the market by implementing constructive new regulations. But there are still risks involved which reinforce the need to increase knowledge and have a long-term perspective. FDI policies in China have evolved alongside the economic development and strengthened the institutional capacity. The new law on foreign investment of the People's Republic of China has been into force since the 1st January of 2020. And the new foreign investment law seeks to address common complaints from business as well as governments. The law specifically prohibits the government and government officials from forcing transfer of technology, protecting the intellectual property rights of foreign investors. The law also gives the possibility to foreign investors to receive the same treatment when they apply for licenses and participate in public procurement. But these are just a few issues we will talk about today. Therefore, without any further ado, I'm looking forward to listening to the very interesting presentations by the speakers that will follow. And thank you very much for having me today, and I hope you'll enjoy this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno. Now, as you said, let's enter into the discussion. So I would like to introduce you all our Mr. Shane Farley, who is legal advisor of D'Andrea & Partners Legal Counsel. He will enlighten us today on the best practices to be adopted while investing in China. Thank you, Shane, please. Sorry, you are muted, Shane.
Sorry, apologies for that. Thank you, Veronica, for your introductory remarks, and Mr. Bruno for joining us here today. So as alluded to by Veronica, I'm Shane Farley, the legal advisor for the Chongqing office of D'Andrea & Partners Legal Counsel. And for my presentation today, I'd like to go through a broad sort of overview of the best practices for foreign investment in China. This is also in conjunction with, as Mr. Bruno mentioned, the foreign investment law as promulgated in 2020, and what not only new market entrants have to adhere to, but existing companies based in the Chinese market as well. So this is basically how I'd like to formulate my presentation here today. We'll see firstly how, oh, apologies, just back one. We'll see firstly how the choice of your business industry will affect your investment in the Chinese marketplace. Then we'll see, moving on from the foreign investment law in 2020, how the Chinese marketplace treats foreign investors in terms of their forms of business in China. And again, moving towards the corporate governance considerations that foreign investors have to take into practice post 2020. And then finally, when you do decide to invest in the Chinese marketplace, where would be the best location for your specific company's investment? So firstly, in regards to anyone who's not very familiar with the Chinese marketplace, the first and most important place to start for foreign investors is the negative list of foreign investment. Put simply, this is a list of forbidden and restricted industries issued by the Chinese government on an annual basis, basically stating industries which foreign investors are forbidden to invest in. I give the example here of domestic express services, restricted fields which foreign investors may invest in. However, there are certain conditions or stipulations in order for a foreign investor to invest within that specific field. So before even entering the Chinese marketplace, a foreign investor should firstly address the negative list in regards to their specific industry. However, there is some good news in regards to the negative list, probably poorly named in this sense, but if your specific industry isn't included in the negative list, then you would be free to invest as if you were a domestically invested industry. As Mr. Bruno alluded to in his introductory remarks, there would be a sense of equal treatment in terms of foreign investors and domestic investors in this sense. Now, moving on from business industries, we see the forms of business have been somewhat, say, expanded since the promulgation of the foreign investment law in 2020. Previously, we had the commonly known wholly foreign-owned entities, as well as the joint venture companies. Now there is a multitude of means in which foreign investors can invest in the Chinese marketplace. That is to say, there are a number of forms of business. However, these forms must still comply with the negative list as alluded to in the previous slide. So we see, firstly, your decision on industries will influence your investment in China. The forms of business, although open, are still subject to the negative list. So moving forward with specific aspects of corporate governance, which foreign investors should be aware of. Firstly, for new investors post-2020, your company will have to adhere to the PRC company law or partnership law. For new investors, this is something that, I don't know, you would have to be aware of prior to your investment. However, for existing, we'll say, wholly foreign-owned entities or joint ventures, there is somewhat of an issue in this sense. Whereas previously there were laws, say, governing your investment in China, post 2020, your
in the 100,000, the tax will be based on the invoice amount. Maybe if you are selling, for example, I'm selling tables to my client, and I issue an invoice to my client with 100,000 bill. Then on the bill, it has 13% of the VAT tax, which meaning the client would pay me 100,000 plus 13,000 VAT tax. So different industry has their different VAT tax rate. For goods or importing goods, the VAT tax rate is 13%. And for renting or transporting industry, the VAT tax rate is 9%. And for financial services and for modern services, these are 6%. I might understand that you may not familiar with modern services. This I took out direct translation from the tax law. The modern services is, you can understand it as any services excluding rental and transporting. For example, if a company providing financial consulting services for another entity, or providing cleaning services, or providing life-related services, these are all considered as modern services, and these are 6%. So comparing with your maybe other countries' VAT tax, you would have a comparison to say, okay, if I start up a company in China, am I going to cost a lot in the tax or less? Secondly is the corporate income tax. I think most of you may be familiar with this tax. This tax is based on the profit. For example, if the company has $1 million revenue and they have maybe 500,000 as the cost and expense, and then they have 500,000 profits, the profit is taxable. So the company would pay the corporate income tax to the government. In recent years, because the Chinese government is really pushing to help the small to medium enterprise to grow, so the small enterprise, they actually paying very little corporate income tax. Take here, for example, the general rule in China is that the corporate income tax rate is 25%. But if you are a small scale company, your tax rate, if your taxable income is less or equal to 1 million, the tax rate in CIT is only 5%. If your taxable income is between 1 million to 3 million, then that would be around 5% to 10%. Meaning if I have 2 million taxable income, for example, the first million would tax based on 5%. The exceeded 1 million will be taxed on 10%. So on average, it would be around 7% or 7.5% of the tax rate. If the company has the taxable income that is larger than 3 million RMB, then the taxable income will be taxable for 25% for all of them. Take this for example. If you have 3.1 million taxable income, then your CIT would be taxable for 25%, which meaning is 775,000. But if you have 1 million or 2 million or exactly 3 million, you can also enjoy this tax preferential policy. But every policy has their requirement. But how to justify if a company is a small scale or a small to medium scale? There's 3 categories. First one, the company's taxable income must be below 3 million RMB. Secondly, the company's employees has to be under 300 employees. Thirdly, the company's total asset value must be equal or smaller than 50 million assets. So if you fit those 3 categories, then your company is small scale and you can enjoy these preferential policies. Secondly, is the equity investment in China. So the first question is why should do the equity investments? I think for many people, myself actually sometimes included. I think if we start a company, it's safer than do equity investment, because if I have my own company, everything is transparent to myself. If I do an investment to a third party or to another company, the financial data or the management or the daily operating activities is not 100% transparent to myself. So it feels me, the investor may not feel very safe when they do the equity investment, especially when do overseas investment. However, through the COVID-19 situation, we can see the Chinese market, especially for manufacturing or any other industries, the sustainability or the regulation side is more stable because the social environment is controlled fairly well during this period of time. So a lot of companies or our clients, they generate revenues during this period of time, but other subsidiaries that was in overseas may not doing very well. So in order to decrease the risk of your assets, it's good to have an equity investment that was in different countries or different territories or different policy regulations that would spread your risk and increase your profitability. Secondly, what makes a good equity investment? A lot of our clients, they have this equity investment, and then we help them to monitor their invested company quarterly or monthly basis. We provide them with this financial supervision report or something like that. Is that we viewed or our experience that a lot of successful investing project was based on a lot of research at the beginning of the time. And then they did a lot of the market research, and then they know what they are investing to. This is very important to the investors. Thirdly, is that if you can hire a local consulting firm, especially for example, it's a financial consulting firm, help you to monitor the invested companies, to provide you with the quarterly financial data, or to visit the company that you are invested, then that would help you to provide a third party point of view to see whether or not the company is doing well or doing bad. So that will also help you to justify if the equity investment is successful or not, and decrease the risk. The lastly is the essential points that I would like to emphasize. So the takeaway of today is that, firstly, the potential client is a good sign for start a business in China. If you have a potential client in China, then I think it's a very good sign that you can trying to start a company in China and doing business internally. Because a lot of the clients in China, they prefer to have their suppliers also in China. For them, it's more manageable. For them, it's the goods or the services, they can contact the person in the same time zone so that they can fix the problem very quickly. And secondly, is the industry experience will help to decrease the risk when you deciding to do the equity investment. Thirdly, choosing a consulting firm wisely may help you with the to decrease the communicating cost. We understand that if you invest a company or start a company in overseas, there's a lot of potential problems that you may not expect when because it's overseas, it's hard to management because you're not familiar with the local regulation. So if you can find a third party or consulting firms that can help you with the understanding of this regulation, understand of the management, the system, then I think that will improve your successfulness in starting a business or doing the investing in equity side. The lastly is that when you invest the company in, for example, when you do an equity investment, when you're receiving the dividend, how much you can receive. For example, if the Chinese company distributes 1 million to your company, to your mother company, then how much tax you should pay or how much tax you should expect from Chinese government? The answer is 10%. If there is 1 million, for example, for dividends you will receive in this year, and then 10% of them will live in China and paying the withholding tax. I think that's the most essential point that you would like to know when you do the equity investment in China. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you very much. Now I would like to go back to Shane, who was interrupted by the technical problem. Sorry for this. Please, Shane, let's return to your presentation and yes, thank you.
Yeah, apologies for before, but we're back.
Sadly interrupted. Okay, so basically I was elaborating on the effect of the foreign investment law on existing foreign invested companies within the Chinese marketplace. So for wholly foreign owned entities, there's little to change in terms of corporate governance, but for joint ventures, there are a multitude of let's say corporate governance changes to be made, but the good news is there's a 5-year transitional period to do so. But as advisors, we would try and push this to be moved forward as soon as possible. So you can read the specific changes to be made for yourself, because we're a bit pushed for time, unfortunately.
No, but yeah, just you know, for information, I will also share all the PPTs from today's presentations with the participants. So in case you missed something, especially apologies once again for the connection issue, you will be able to have all the material after the webinar. So
Exactly. And again on doesn't seem to go to the next slide. Okay, and again, this seems like a lot of very dense information, but in terms of your location of investment within the Chinese marketplace, of course, for anyone who's familiar, the Chinese government has established a multitude of economic development zones to bolster foreign direct investments within the area. Now, where exactly would your investment be best placed depends on a lot of different factors. You'll see here whether your product is classed as a high-tech product, whether wherever your investment comes from, whether you're invested in a municipality. These are all factors that can assess where your investment within a specific economic development zone would be best placed. Now, as soon as you find the best placed economic development zone for your investment, then we can talk about preferential treatment, which can be offered as per exactly your industry, and a number of different factors which we've outlined on the table here. As Gaia mentioned, we can share these PPTs, so if you have further inquiries into these we'll say specific data, you can address it at a later time. Oh, sorry. So, okay. So exactly, in addition to economic development zones, you can also individually negotiate an investment agreement either with your local government or the development zone government within the area which you invest in. Now, this can be on a case-by-case basis, as you can imagine. So the preferential treatment you may receive is dependent on your company exactly. Now, again, with the foreign investment law, the enforcement of such investment agreements is guaranteed, whether it be any shifts in government or change in investment agenda. And again, we're a bit pushed for time, so I'll just speed on through to the main takeaways for this best practices of foreign investment in China. So basically, prior to entering the market, you of course have to consider your form of business as well as your industry as per the negative list. For new investors in the marketplace, there are corporate governance considerations to be made as per the PRC company law and the partnership law, and wherever you decide to invest, there should be an economic development zone which could be best suited to your specific investment. In addition to which, there are investment agreements that you can negotiate with your local government on a case-by-case basis. Now, there are, of course, a multitude of different things I'd like to present on as well, including the requirements for foreign investors to report their investment information, the security review procedure now introduced in recent years, but I think we'll leave this to either another time or in the Q&A, and I would pass it on to the rest of our great speakers here today.
Yeah.
So for me, that's
thank you, Shane. I also saw that we had a couple of questions already coming in, so I think there's going to be a little bit of time later to yes, approach your questions.
Thank you, Shane. So if you, as we said, if you have any question, please feel free to leave it in in the chat box, and we will read them later on. Now it's the turn of our Mr. Riccardo Verzella, who is legal advisor of D'Andrea & Partner Legal Counsel in our Shanghai office. Today he will talk about the key regulatory updates and trends. Thank you, Riccardo. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica, for your kind presentation. Thanks also to Mr. Gianpaolo Bruno for joining our webinar today, and also to Devin and Shane for your insightful presentation, which I'm sure will be useful for our audience. So my topic today is about key regulatory updates, basically general updates that are of interest both for foreign investors willing to enter the Chinese market, but also for companies already present in the market. Now, the big topic nowadays is all about data security and privacy law. As you may have heard, early July, a big platform called Didi, which is the most important car-hailing platform in China, encountered a cybersecurity review and was alleged to have seriously violated personal information law. And not this particular regulation, but the previous ones in force. And as a consequence, currently Didi is forbidden to be downloaded from the Chinese app stores, and even new users can be registered. So this is indeed a element that helps us to understand how sensitive is becoming the compliance to this comprehensive framework on personal data protection. Also, you may see that in September 2021, we will have all new regulation in place about data security, which we jointly work with the formal cybersecurity law. And it is also expected the new draft or the implementation of the personal information protection law, which currently is in the stage of draft, but indeed is expected to be adopted and implemented soon. Therefore, all companies, like newly invested companies, companies already operating in China, shall be aware of these new regulations coming in place and ensure their compliance, made in account of the liabilities and the penalties that may be applicable in case of non-compliance. So today we focus mainly on the new regulation, the data security law and the personal information protection law. Starting from the personal information law, indeed, a preliminary remark is about the definition of personal information. Briefly saying, it is extremely wide. So the issue is not about defining what is a personal information, but what can exclude the scope of application of the law. Basically, only anonymization can exclude the application of the law, because personal information is any information that can be related to a natural person that is identified or identifiable. So the concept is very general. And as for the scope of application, it's important to understand that it is not relevant the location of who processes or handles the data, but the location of the natural persons whose data is involved. So insofar as the natural person in the territory of China, domiciled or present in China, then the provisions of law should be applicable. Basically, the new regulation includes a lot of duties for personal information handlers. In more detail, the main concept is that the handling, the processing of personal data is allowed insofar as there is consent of the party, but not simple consent. It should be an informed consent. So it means that it is necessary not only to obtain the consent of the party whose personal information is involved, but also to explain and inform this party about, for example, who is the handler, which is the purpose of the handling, which is the retention period. And also, it would be necessary to obtain a separate and specific consent in case this data shall be then transferred to other subjects. So it means the parties should expressly agree on the transfer and also the identity of these third parties. Or also specific provision are foreseen for sensitive data. So for sensitive data, it's also necessary to obtain a specific consent. Also, it will be necessary to implement some security measures to prevent unauthorized access, leaks, or distortions, which are better outlined in the data security law more than in the personal information law draft. And in certain cases, it will be also necessary to conduct a risk assessment. For example, the most important case is when handling sensitive personal information. So data security law, with the personal information law is still a draft, the data security law it was already adopted and will enter in force this September. So it means that companies, 1st of September, are formally bound by this regulation. Actually, the regulation is still based on principles, so indeed it should be further implemented. And this doesn't mean that in September there will be a strict compliance, but still the company should be ready, because the amount of obligation that law imposed requires a lot of attention, also in account of the penalties that would apply in case of no compliance. So basically the key concepts are those applying this slide. So first of all, it will be implemented a system to classify different forms of data. So depending on the sensitivity of the data, with particular respect to national security or public interest, the law, and most importantly, the implementing regulation, will determine the applicable security standards. For example, for important data, we will have special obligations. Actually, for example, there is not yet a comprehensive definition of important data. So this, for example, is an element that should be further outlined. But the regulation, which will be implemented, which will enter in force September, already says that important data handlers shall appoint a person who should be directly responsible for the handling and to comply with the obligations set forth by the law. And also, important data handlers shall conduct also regular risk assessments to check if there is any there is possibility of leakage. So basically, the aim is to protect to the most possible extent as important data. And also, there will be some restriction to cross-border transfer of data. And these restrictions were already in place, so it is just a better, like the relevant condition for the cross-border transfer will be better outlined. It is briefly saying, it is important also to consider where the as you may see in this slide outlined, which would be the main relevant aspects of the new data protection law. So in particular, I was talking about the particular obligations that are requested for handling important data. In particular, mainly to conduct risk assessments, submit risk assessment report to the authorities, appoint a responsible person to comply with the obligations set forth by the law. As I'm also saying that this definition, like important data or even core data, which is also mentioned in the regulation, are not yet well defined. So indeed, the implementing regulation will follow. We should better specify the definition of important data and also the obligations that shall follow the data protection. And I would like to add an additional point regarding another valuable trend here in China, which is the increased protection for intellectual property rights. This is particularly important also for foreign investors. And I would like to remind that on June 1st, we had two new amended laws in force, the amended patent law and the amended copyright law. In particular, the patent law is really important because it extended the protection for design patents. So new design patents will be granted a protection of 15 years compared to the previous term of 10 years. As for copyright law, so the new version is particularly valuable because the new copyright law covers some forms of allows to better contrast the many forms of digital piracy. So it now the copyright law covers also streaming events and also subtitles. I don't know if you heard that we had a recent case for RenRen, which was a platform which was allegedly freely distributing subtitles of international TV shows. And as you may know, also the translation is pertains to a copyright. So indeed, it is not possible to realize and to freely distribute subtitles. So this new law is indeed follows the evolution of times and allows to better protect the IPRs. And as a last remark, so I would like to remind, and with this we can directly go to the conclusive remarks. As for IPR, I would like to remind the importance of filing the patents and trademarks here in China, as it is necessary to obtain their protection in the country. As for copyright, we don't have mandatory registration, but it's still advisable to in particular, as it is released, the burden of proving the date of creation, the ownership of the creative work. And as for data protection, it will be necessary to pay a lot of attention to the development of legislation, which currently is still not yet implemented, and therefore we shall follow a strict implementation and be ready to comply with this new comprehensive framework in order to avoid penalties and non-compliance. Thank you so much for your attention. Now,
yeah,
thank you, Riccardo. Now it's the turn of Gaia, Miss Gaia Rizzi. She's marketing and events manager at Eastern Communication and Events. She will tell us which are the marketing and trend opportunities in China today. Please, Gaia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to go fast, so to avoid to have internet connection breaking down once again. But anyway, also I wanted to mention in all the PPTs that you will receive, there's also our email address. So if anything is unclear, please let us know. So as you said, Veronica, I have the very pleasure of going through the marketing trends and opportunities in China. So today I decided to go through 4 key points, namely comparison between USA, EU, China, most popular social media. Then I will go through a little bit deeper within the social media usage in China. I will give some brief insights of what is the different approach for B2B and B2C. And then on a final hand, practical tips that we got here with our agency working with foreign companies in China. So first of all, this is a very interesting graph that I always like to share with our clients, especially with their HQ in Western countries. Because it's interesting to see, for example, I believe most of our audience today and also my colleagues here may be familiar with the first part. So the top 8 social media apps in the USA, which are basically the same ones as of Europe. But then if we go through top 8 social media apps in China, I feel like even my colleagues here who've been living in China for a while may not be 100% familiar with all of them, just because China social media ecosystem is a complete different world. So I take a wild guess, WeChat is maybe the one that is most well known, also with our audience internationally wise, but the other ones are still not very, let's say, popular outside of China and with non-local Chinese. So here it's to give you a bit of a more precise overview of which are the most used social media platforms in China. As you can see, WeChat is definitely the absolute winner with 73%. And then going down, there are a series of apps, which again, I'm not sure you may be familiar with, but for example, Sina Weibo is basically Chinese Twitter, Kuaishou is a short video app, Douyin is actually the mother company of TikTok. So it's basically the original Chinese version of TikTok. Baidu is our Google, and so on. And this is because, as I believe most of you are aware of, here in China, there is a very strong firewall that prevents us to get access to Western social media platforms. So for example, for us, it's really hard and we're very limited in accessing social media and digital platforms such as Google, Facebook, and Instagram. That's why also when we work with foreign companies in China, we definitely have to adapt to the Chinese platforms. And here with this chart, I just wanted to give a more straightforward overview of which are the platforms that are kind of the counterpart with each other. So we have Youku instead of YouTube. Taobao is our go-to marketplace to literally buy anything. So I would say it's a hybrid in between our eBay and Amazon. Then for Facebook itself, we don't really have a counterpart here. But then if we consider Facebook as a broader ecosystem, so if you consider, Facebook companies such as Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, then WeChat might be the platform that goes the closer to it, but still not exactly the same. And consider that WeChat for us is essential to live our everyday life. So for instance, we use it for messaging, to pay, even to register for our vaccine appointment. We do literally everything with WeChat and we cannot live without. And then as I said, Baidu instead of Google, and then Weibo, it serves the same purpose as of Twitter. And then here, I just wanted to show some numbers regarding social media use in China, because the numbers are astonishing. So if you look at the total number of active social media users, you see 930 million, which is basically it's the only country in the world. India is going really close, but China is still #1. With the total number of active users. And if you want a comparison, for example, in the US, as of June 2021, so as of last month, there are 230 million users, which represents 70% of the whole US population. So you see, it's a whole different environment in here. And I do believe it's keep growing. It will keep growing. The new generations are native digitals. You see the annual growth is still double-digit with almost 13%. So it's definitely not going to stop. And then a very interesting fact is that basically 100% of social media users access social media and online shopping via mobile phone. So something that is still different from how we do in the West, where still, your laptop, computer is kind of a go-to tool to access to social media. In China, no. So that's why also the apps are made for mobile phones. E-commerce stores are made for mobile phones. So it's a very different approach on how to get to, to reach your consumers around China. And here's a promise, a little bit of insight on the difference between the approach that foreign companies should adopt in terms of B2B and B2C business models. So basically, WeChat and Weibo are kind of the staples of China marketing and whatever communication strategy you may adopt, because they are the first platform that potential clients, consumers, partners may reach you through. So these platforms are even more important than websites here in China, and that's why it's really important to keep them up to date and to manage them properly on a regular basis. Then, if you're a B2B, something that we see working very well is, for example, Zhihu here, because that is the counterpart of the Western Quora. So it's like a Q&A platform to share knowledge and the know-how. And then LinkedIn is still very much, it gives a lot of positive feedback, but the thing that we recommend to foreign companies is to always create a LinkedIn China page. That is because basically, even though LinkedIn is accessible, not all features that are present in the West are also accessible here. For example, from LinkedIn China, we cannot see videos, PDFs, slideshows, events. So basically, if your company and your HQ are investing heavily in this kind of content on your LinkedIn, you have to keep in mind that this specific content is not accessible to your potential Chinese clients. That's why a dedicated page, which is regularly updated with accessible material from our side, is really important. And then if you go to B2C, Xiaohongshu is growing incredibly fast. It's a sort of hybrid in between Instagram and TripAdvisor. So it's a really a good platform for luxury brands, beauty brands, fashion, apparel, all these kind of more, trending brands. And then Douyin, as I explained, is basically the Chinese TikTok. And then in between, I put live streaming because it's a phenomenon that we have to talk about. So as you can read, the live streaming industry is estimated to earn $60 billion annually already, and it's growing. And in this case, what I wrote about sales reps and influencers is because both B2B and B2C companies can get into the live streaming. B2B use their sales reps, which are actually extremely talented, and they're also becoming some kind of little celebrities around China. And then on the B2C side, we have influencers, or here in China, we also call them KOLs, which stands for key opinion leaders. And as you can see also here in the end, live streams also on big e-commerce festivals, which are definitely some of the biggest e-commerce festivities throughout China during the year. Only live streams accounted for 6 billion in sales, which was already doubling up from the year before. And let's see what's going to happen this November. But I do believe that numbers are going to keep increasing. And then on a final note, practical tips. So I hope that with my presentation, it was quite clear that localize your marketing approach is essential. So it's not an option, it's the way to do communication and marketing in China. Because as I said, if you rely too much on the Western apps promoted, internationally wise, you will not reach Chinese consumers. Secondly, test. That's because we also see with some of our clients that the kind of content that works well, let's say in their home country, may it be country in Europe or somewhere in the US, might work, in China might not. So that's why you really have to get out of your comfort zone and try new ways to tell your story, tell your brand and your core values. And that's also why it's really important to be ready to adapt fast. That's because there are new platforms popping up every other day. New features have been added basically every month on all the major platforms. So you have to be ready to have a local team or an agency to support you. Otherwise, you will not be able to easily keep track of all the latest trends. Then definitely among the latest trends is can you hear? Yes, it's videos and interactive content. So videos, as you see also in Europe, in the US, TikTok is booming. Same thing here in China, but it actually started much earlier. And then, for instance, interactive content. So what we see with brands is that Chinese consumers are extremely demanding. So you need to be able to post content that engages them, maybe with games, maybe with coupons, lotteries, something that goes beyond plain text. Otherwise, it's not gonna get enough traction. And then last but not least, definitely China's marketing is not cheap. So here we always have a problem with the HQ thinking China is cheap, maybe China is cheap, marketing in China is gonna be cheap. That's not how it works, because here the competition is extremely high. The fact that you have to invest in video and interactive content, that requires a lot of budget from your company. So what we always suggest is get into the Chinese market from a marketing perspective only when you have a budget solely dedicated to the Chinese market. Otherwise, it's gonna finish before you even realize, and all the efforts are going to be gone, because if you're not on point for the long term, the Chinese market is not going to work out and is not going to bring the results that you want. That said, China is a great country to test out marketing activities. So for whatever information you may need, my information are here. And then of course, we will share the PPT. And with that, I conclude, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gaia. Now we can have our Q&A session, or are we running out of time?
I think we have a few minutes if our audience is kind enough to stick with us, because I got a couple of questions that I think are really interesting. So I will quickly go through them and then we can close. And then again, this webinar is also going to be available on YouTube. So if anybody missed some parts, they will be able to. I received a question for Devin. So Devin, basically somebody from the audience is asking, in case somebody heard that it's difficult to remit dividends from a Chinese foreign invested company to the mother company abroad. So is this true? And if this happens, what is the procedure to follow, or if you have any advice in this sense?
If I'm not mistaken, the question was, can you hear me?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the audience was asking how difficult it is to remit the dividend.
Exactly.
From the Chinese company
to the mother company abroad.
It's very, very easy, to be honest, because we recently just had a case that is exactly like this. We have a company that was in Italy and then invested in Chinese company. The Chinese company just distributes their dividend. All they need to do is that to issue a board resolution and then have both sides signed on the board resolution, agreed how exactly the amount that they agreed to distribute, and then bring this paper to the bank, ask the Chinese company's accountant, bring this paper to the bank, asking information for the bank accounts, asking information for the Italian receiving bank account and for the Italian shareholder information, because the bank would love to have this mother company's shareholder information in order to check if they are on a blacklist or not. Then you have this information, you pay 10% of the withholding tax, then you can do it in a second.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope it was clear for the anonymous attendee who asked this question. And then I also collected another one that is for you, Shane. So somebody asked, for investment information reporting obligations in China, what are the outcomes for non-compliance?
Yeah, this was part of the presentation I didn't get to, I think, elaborate on. So again, with the foreign investment law, there are obligations for foreign investors to issue their investment information on an initial basis when they start their investment, and annually, and if there's any changes as well. Compliance is, of course, mandatory. However, the authorities do give you time to correct if you don't adhere to your information reporting obligations. But if you don't correct within a period of time, there are of course, fiscal penalties. And if the authorities find that you're intentionally avoiding your obligations or misinforming the authorities, then there will be very large penalties and effects on your company social credit score. So quite strict penalties for non-compliance, I think.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, I get back the word to you, Veronica, for the closing.
Sure. So I think we can go towards the end of today's workshop. I would like to thank everybody, all our speakers, Mr. Bruno, who had to leave for another appointments, and Instant Event Marketing, Events and Communication for the organization of this webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us later on. Thank you very much and have a nice day and evening. Bye.
And thank you everybody for the patience. Bye.
Awesome.
Bye.